Bobby, the Geek Guru. Geek definitely, Guru, we'll find out eventually. But welcoming everybody back to another Wednesday edition of the Geek Guru. Wednesday is NES Day because, you know, NES is in the middle of Wednesday. So last week I talked about Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Got a couple comments, a couple of messages from people talking about it further in detail, so I appreciate that. Continue to love and keep coming with some more information and more questions because I love answering questions or going back and forth with you guys. But this week I wanted to talk about another game that I loved. Probably my second favorite game of all time, or at least in my top list. And that would be Kid Icarus. Growing up I always called it Kid Icarus, but come to find out later on it was Kid Icarus. Loosely built on the Icarus story of the little boy whose dad built wings for him. And he flew too close to the sun and his wings burned up and he died. This game was hard. I think that it didn't really get its true appreciation because the first four levels, first four stages, they were tough. You start off and you got to go up, and if you could beat the first four stages, the rest was gravy. The rest really was not that hard in my mind anyway. Was not as hard as the beginning because the beginning your life bar is very short, so you can't take many hits. You're also traveling vertically, so you're just learning how to basically play this game, and if you fall off a ledge and you fall, you're done. It isn't one of these Mario Brother games where if you fell, like Super Mario Bros. 2, if you fell, you just kind of went down a little bit, a couple of pegs. In this one, if you fell, you were done. That was it. Unless you happen to have like a little ledge under the screen that you just barely got up to, but that was rare, and you got lucky if that happened to you. But as you continued on, it got better because of the fact that, well, it got easier for the fact that you gained more life on your life bar. You also got more weapons. You started to learn that when you went into these dojos, you should play the dojos. Absolutely. Even in the weaker stages. I would always find that I had to, or you should, basically keep fighting all the enemies in the early stages. Get all that money you can. Heart equating to money. So you want to get all that money you can because when the time comes, you will be able to start buying stuff that you're going to need. You're going to want to buy the fruit punches and stuff like that that basically give you your life back if you happen to run out of life. The graphics were decent. For that time, they were good. You know, you're talking early 80s. But let's be honest. 90% of the graphics in the 80s on the NES were amazing. And at that time, they were amazing because you got to remember, especially in the United States, we're coming off of the Atari generation where you were lucky if you could make out anything. Like, you look at Indiana Jones. Dude, I had no clue what I was doing in that game. And no instructions with the games, like no how-to, like none of that. And that was the nice thing with Nintendo. Nintendo installed these instruction booklets on how to play the game, but they didn't hold your hand at the same time. They didn't sit there and walk you through and say, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this. But it was enough that you could pick up enough and start running with it and going and really getting a grip on the game and figuring out where you needed to be and what you needed to do. It also, you know, the dungeons per se, they were always tough because you'd always get to that point where you're getting ready to go fight the boss. One of these eggplant wizards would hit you with an eggplant, basically turn you into a giant eggplant with legs, and you have to go find a doctor or a nurse and get it cut off you so you can turn back to normal. It's funny because I play now, and the game isn't as difficult to avoid the eggplant. It could just be because I already know the arc on the throws and to watch out. Like, they're either going to throw them a low arc or a high arc, and you just got to watch out for that first throw and then get in there and do your damage. But that was always cool. The bosses were, and this is the funny thing, the final boss, which is Medusa, spoilers, you get to Medusa, and she's just a giant head. Like, the entire side of the screen is a giant head. But to me, I felt like Medusa was so much more easier than the other bosses. The 3 bosses that you lead up to before you finally get to her, to get the weapons, the mirror, and the helmet, and the arrow. She was so much easier to me than the other bosses. I don't know why that was. Probably because she just sat there, and you had snakes coming at you and stuff. But it wasn't anything like the other ones where you had to actually dodge and move and figure out what they were doing. A big help was the NES Max controller. And I don't know who exactly remembers that, but it was kind of like an NES controller with little tiny handlebars on it. It had, like, you would think in today's terms, like a circle pad on the 3DS. But it wasn't. It wasn't analog or anything like that. But what the thing was, you had your B and your A button. But you also had these little gray buttons. I think they were below, if I'm not mistaken, or above. But they were automatic fire. So when you got to the bosses, you could unload a lot of shots quickly. That Max controller made a lot of games easier as time went on. Just because it was, you didn't have to sit there and keep pushing the button. I think it really helped another game, which was Decathlon, where you had to, we used to, like, slide your finger across the B and the A as quickly as possible to make your guy run faster. You used to get blisters on your index finger because you would rub so hard it would actually start to eat the skin off your finger. So the Max controller was cool because you could actually get in there against a boss, lay on the fire, and just wipe them out quicker than typical. You didn't really have to necessarily think about avoiding them and all that stuff. Where when you didn't have that, it was a little bit tougher. It wasn't much tougher, but it was a little tougher. The other thing was you wanted to buy up all the sledgehammers and get all the sledgehammers you could. Because you get them sledgehammers and you're basically unlocking or getting yourself people to help you later on in the game. Meaning the other angels. They were turned to stone by looking at Medusa. So you hit them with the hammer and they fly off. And it's funny because you're playing the game early on and you don't know that. Again, it's not like Nintendo said, like, get all these people because they're going to help you in the end. Like, you had to find all that stuff out yourself. So you hit, like, 1 or 2 here and there because you realize, like, what are these sledgehammers for? And I would, like, run around with them and, like, swing them, but they're not doing anything. And then eventually I hit one. I was like, oh, what's that? And I see the angel take off, and I said, okay, apparently I got to hit these things. So I would hit a couple more, but I didn't hit many more. I thought the hammers were used for the big boss. I didn't know that they were more or less just used to free out the angels that were turned to stone. But then when you would get to the end, the final boss, you would see these angels come flying in, and every time you would shoot, they would shoot with you. So you start to learn, after that, you learn real quick, it's like, hey, I got to unlock as many of these angels as I can, which again leads back to you want to get as much money as possible because you want to buy these hammers, which there were only 10, I don't know what their, I forget what their money system was. It wasn't dollars, but whatever. It was 10, whatever you needed. 10 hearts. Dumbass, I just said that earlier, didn't I? But you needed 10 hearts to buy a hammer. And then you would buy the hammer, it would unlock, and you would so on and so forth. I think it was a lot of fun because they mixed it up. You had the vertical stage, you had the one horizontal stage, and then the final vertical stage. But when you got to that final vertical stage, I think in my mind when I first started, I go, oh man, this is going to be so hard because the first set were so hard. But by that time, you're so powerful, you can blow right to the top, get what you got to get. Those final 3 were so easy. But what was kind of neat about the game was it restarted after you did beat it. But you start the next round fully stocked. And that's when I say you learn real quickly that the first time you play that game, the first 3 stages, it's tough. Tough because you don't have the powers and abilities and the stronger arrows and stronger bow and all that stuff to kill stuff quicker and shooting longer across the stage. And the armor per se that like swirled around you, the fire and the fire on the end of the arrows, and there was a few things that helped you. But by the time you got there, the second time around, you had all that, so it just became very easy to go through. Again, I felt like the graphics were good for the time, but again, everything that in that era was good, really good. It was in the par of like a Mario game. It was in the par of a Zelda game. It was on par with Metroid, and I think Mike Tyson's Punch-Out was probably the better of the graphics at that time. But then when the next round came out with Super Mario Bros. 2 and 3 and Zelda 2, it started to leave that other stuff behind. But by that time, the system had some time on it, and the developers that were making the games had more time on it. It's kind of funny because you don't get as much love for Pit and Kid Icarus as the other games do, as Zelda does, and as Mario games do, and Kirby and all that other stuff. And Kid Icarus has always been one of my favorite games of all time. They redid it, or they relaunched it, so to speak, a couple years ago on the 3DS with some weird controls. Made it tough. You need like a kickstand to kind of help you play it, which I just wish they would kind of go back and just do a similar game as the first one and the sequel that was on the Game Boy. With the vertical and the side scroll, just redo the graphics, make them nicer. I don't need a 3. Don't get me wrong. Let me stop right now. Kid Icarus on the 3DS is awesome. Kid Icarus Uprising. And if you don't have it, you really, really should get it. But that said, I feel like I would have preferred that game be on the Wii U, and then go back and do a 2D Kid Icarus on the 3DS. I think that would be awesome. I really do. I think that it would make a lot of people happy, a lot of fans happy, but I would just like to see like an old... Listen, I'm not the type of person that has to have this open world 3D game. I love them. I enjoy them. I enjoy the Arkham Cities and the Arkham Knights and the Assassin's Creeds and all that type of stuff. Them style of games and the Last of Us and all. I get it. I love it. That said, I don't have to have all my games be like that. I think I come from a generation that we grew up on 2D games, side scrollers, things of that nature. So. And the pixel art. Pixel art was awesome, and I think that Nintendo now at this point could do a pixel art game. Look at the Shovel Knight games of today, and you look at those games, and they had the homage to the old school with the graphics, but it's more or less newer gameplay, newer style. It's a better game. So I don't see why Nintendo couldn't do something like that for the 3DS, for a Kid Icarus game. I think that... But I would like to see more like the new Super Mario Brothers style. Just a little bit of flair, a little bit of... not so rough around the edges, per se. But I would take one that's like Shovel Knight in a heartbeat. I just loved that Kid Icarus. It was a lot of fun. I would literally play that game, whenever I was bored and I didn't have anything new at the time, and it was one of my favorites, and I would beat it every year. At least once a year, I'd go back, I'd play it, and I'd beat it. Just because I loved it so much. And I haven't done it in a while, and I've tinkered with it, and I've gotten through a couple of levels, a couple stages, but not like I did back then. And, we didn't have the luxury of the internet back then, where I could look at maps immediately to see when I got stuck. We had to, draw our own maps and figure out how to get from place to place to place. You didn't have the luxury of all that back in the day. I think people today don't realize how spoiled they are. We didn't even have strategy guides. You wouldn't even have the only thing we had to get a tip was you'd call a 900 number at Nintendo, and they would basically fill you in, and give you some clues, and give you some tips, but they wouldn't tell you everything. So that's it. That's all I got. I've talked your ears off enough about Kid Icarus. Next week I'm going to talk about another NES game. Don't know yet what we'll talk about. But thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. I always appreciate it. Leave a comment below. What did you think about Kid Icarus? Was it one of your favorite games? Did you hate it? What do you think about the graphics? What do you think about Pit? Do you like the idea of a new 2D game? Or are you cool with the open world? Do you want to see more of Kid Icarus and Pit besides every few years, every 5-6 years, a Smash. Thank you guys for watching. Remember to hit that subscribe button. Hit the like, please. You can follow me on Twitter at the Geek Gurus. You can follow me on Instagram at the Geek Gurus. I'm also on Facebook, facebook.com/the Geek Gurus. That's all. Thank you very much. Peace, mother.